tips and tricks on how to film your footage for the editing process later on. Just some things to keep in mind when filming that'll make your life a lot easier when you get to editing. So this is mostly aimed at the beginner content creator, somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience filming or doesn't have a lot of experience with content creation and video editing. So hopefully by the end of this session, you will have some useful tips and tricks, some concepts and techniques for when you hit record on your camera, you're all ready to go, and the editing process should be that little bit easier for you. So there are 5 tips that we're going to cover. Let's get started. So tip number 1, apologies for my notes, but yeah. So film with intention. Why? Well, oftentimes as a beginner content creator, you want to film everything. You want to film everything and you want to film constantly. So you hit go on the camera and you leave it to record and you just move the camera around and you leave it to go for your entire shoot. This is great because you will have a ton of footage by the end of your shoot, but it is going to take you a very, very, very long time to get through that footage. A couple of hours, if not a couple of days, to scrub through that footage, to find what footage you want to use, to cut things up, to organize things, to name them, to number them, and so on. So when I say film with intention, I mean have a clear idea of what you are going to film and try to make that as relevant and concise as possible. So if you're going to be doing a talking point, or if you're going to be doing some scenic footage, or if you're going to be doing a time lapse, have that intention in mind. So for example, if you want to do a talking point, you want to break up your dialogue into little paragraphs and film each paragraph as a shot. So every time you change the subject or move on to a new idea or a talking point, you want to change your camera. So you sit down, you get ready, you say your thing, and you stop. Then you change your angle or change your location or both. And then once you've got that set up, you can then hit record again on your camera and begin that next shot. So film with intention, tip number 1. Tip number 2, static frame hold. So this ties back to the previous tip. So while you're creating these short, concise little clips, particularly if you are filming yourself, you'll be moving, you'll sit down, you'll go to hit record on your camera and you'll be moving forward. So when I say static frame hold, you want to get yourself comfortable, hit record on your camera and breathe, hold the frame for 2 seconds and then start talking. And the same as when you get to the end of the clip, finish what you're saying, hold for 2 seconds, and then go and move to stop recording on your camera. And this is going to help you when it comes to editing because it's going to create these really solid, smooth transitions. So you're going to have a static frame that you can cut onto, and then that is going to join or transition seamlessly into your next shot. So tip number 2, static frame hold. Tip number 3 is cutting into action. So this is a simple rule in that for video editing is you will cut from action to action. So this is somebody either running, walking, playing, doing examples of something, or static to static. And a static shot would be somebody sitting, talking, or standing, talking. In other words, your frame or your shot doesn't move. So cutting into action, action to action. So for example, if you are sitting in one spot and you're talking to the camera and you know that your next shot is going to be someone running or walking or doing something active where the camera is moving, oftentimes if you just cut from a static frame to that action frame, it's going to feel really jarring for your viewer. So it's like being in a car and you're stuck in traffic and it's like that stop, start feeling. That's not going to help your storytelling. So the easiest way to fix that is if you know you're going to have an action shot and vice versa as your next shot or previous shot. If you're sitting down and talking, the best thing to do is when you're getting to the end of what you're going to say, stand up and walk generally in the direction that you know the action shot is going to be walking. So if it's somebody walking this way, you're going to want to stand up and walk towards or walk in that direction. So when you cut to that person doing that action, it's your viewer's already ready, if that makes any sense. So you're already helping them ease into that transition of moving, and vice versa. If you've got somebody walking, perhaps get them to sit down, have a static frame first, and then carry on with your next cut to that static frame. So that's tip number 3, cutting to action. Tip number 4, as I said, there are 5 tips that I'm going to be going through. So tip number 4 is something called title action safe. What is title action safe and why do I want to talk about it? Well, title action safe is an overlay grid that you'll find in most, if not all, video editing software that kind of overlays on top of your footage and allows you to see which areas may be cut or cut off if your footage is either compressed. Sometimes if you compress footage, it crops it. Also, different countries have different kind of television broadcasting ratios. Your TV sizes are different. So your title action safe overlay grid will look something like my badly drawn thing. So it's 2 rectangles. The first rectangle or the outer rectangle is your action safe. So this is where any of your action is going to take place. The inner smaller rectangle, that's title safe. This is pretty self-explanatory where your titles are going to want to be. So if you've got any nameplates or anything like that, we need to make sure that those fall within that title safe. Anything outside of that area may potentially be cropped off if you compress your footage or it goes to a specific TV channel that has a different ratio. So why is this important to keep in mind when you are filming your footage? It's really important that when you're filming to keep that in mind so that you have excess kind of, and framing your shots, when you're framing your shots, to have excess headspace or that little bit of extra room in your frame than you would like. So this is useful for when you put your footage into the editing software and you see that you aren't potentially quite 100% centered. You can then move your footage so that you are 100% centered and not have a yucky black line along the side of your footage. It's also really useful if you decide you want to zoom in a little bit or zoom out a little bit, or if you have some kind of instruction or text overlay or something, or an image, a video, something that you'd like to place either to the left or the right of whoever's talking. You won't have to then go back and refilm that footage to allow for that space. So if you have your title action space overlay grid in the back of your mind when you're setting up your frames, you can then move that footage around within the editing software to allow for things like titles, like instructional text, like reframing and composition and things like that. So that is title action safe. Tip number 4. Tip number 5. We've kind of gone through basic tips of how to film. You're now ready to take those clips and put them into a software. I'm going to save you a whole lot of time because you can do so many hours of research on YouTube, reading up about what's the best kind of software, what each one is going to do, and so on and so forth. But quick and easy, the best free software that I'd recommend getting is a program called DaVinci Resolve. This is free open source software. It's very, very powerful for what you get. You basically get everything that you would need for basic video editing. So you get text overlay, you get transitions, you get color correction, you get some basic audio controls as well. All of this for free, which is really, really fantastic. They also have a pro version that is paid for, and with that you can then install plugins and things like that. Paid software, though, I personally use Adobe Premiere Pro. That's just because it's very good. It's very powerful. But as an artist, as an illustrator, as an animator, I use a lot of other Adobe software. So if you're familiar with Adobe Photoshop, if you're After Effects, any of the Adobe software, it's very easy to transition between them because they all talk to each other really nicely, but also their shortcuts and the general layout of things is it's all pretty similar. So that's what I would suggest for the paid version. So your two versions, the free versions is DaVinci Resolve, and the paid version, I would suggest Adobe Premiere. Now, the thing with both of those software is if you've never used any kind of video editing software before, the learning curve of that is really quite steep. Video editing software, if you've never opened a video editing software before, it's quite overwhelming. There are a lot of buttons, there are a lot of layouts, there are a lot of, everybody's going to do things their own way. So if you watch one video, they're going to tell you to do something a different way to somebody else, and so on. So whether you're going with free software or whether you're going with paid software, in my opinion, go with which one best suits you, because at the end of the day, if you've never used a video editing software before, your learning curve is going to be really, really steep. So this brings me to my next point, which is editing your videos by yourself versus editing or getting a professional editor like myself to edit the videos for you. So as I said, if you're editing the videos for yourself, there is that really, really, really steep learning curve. It's going to take you a lot of time to get used to the software, and that's before you've even started doing any of your edits and trying to put fancy, animated titles in it and these really cool transitions and things like that. So I would say if you are thinking about editing these videos yourself, definitely think about the time it's going to take you to learn all of these new things. But what's great about it is you get to learn a new skill. So that's really cool. Learning things is amazing, and putting the time and effort into something that you have made yourself is also really, really rewarding. However, I would say that initially the quality of your videos isn't going to be as high as a professional, because the pros of getting a pro to do it is they have that experience. They have the software, they have the plugins, they don't have that, they've already been through that learning curve. So you're right off the bat, the quality of your videos is going to be a lot higher. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you a lot of time. And I think in this day and age where time is money, that is going to save you a lot of time. On average, for a 20-minute, I think you guys are doing 20 minutes of completed footage. That would probably take a professional, if you're submitting 45 minutes to 2 hours worth of footage that then needs to be cut down and squeezed down into that 20 minutes, you know, gosh, it can take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours plus to edit that footage and to make it look really good and really smooth. So like I said, if you're getting a professional to do your video editing, it's going to save you a lot of time. So I would say potentially a good solution would be to get a pro or professional to edit your first few videos. And while they're editing your first few videos, that's where you can take the time and take your own footage and learn the software, learn the programs, see how things are done, and see how long it's going to take you to do that. So I could provide that service for you, which is pretty cool. As an added bonus of being an animator, I can create the really cool animated logo titles for you and do all of the really exciting animated texts and things like that. So that's definitely an added bonus of getting a pro to do it for you as well. So that's it for my top 5 tips for filming for editing.